Hey everybody, it's Robert Phoenix, and it is the Friday FARcast. We do this every Friday. I do it every Friday, right around 12 noon. We get a little bit of a late start today, but it's okay. We're here together, and that's all that counts. That's all that matters. And I want to welcome you to today's show. A lot of times people take their time getting into the virtual theater, and we're just we got three people coming on now. And we're going so let me just introduce my guest today. It's my good buddy from across the pond, Mr. Darren Williams, known on the internet as Dazzle Theory. And I've known Darren now, I guess we're going on, Darren, about 9 years. Can you believe that?
Yeah, it's gone pretty fast, yeah.
Yeah, so you found me, I think, around 2010. And I was very impressed with some of your ideas, some of your insights, some of your thoughts. I was also incredibly impressed with your energy and your desire to be kind of what I would call a gadfly, meaning that you were a person that would connect other people, that you were kind of this group, and you still are, a very interesting link with a lot of different worlds on the internet and a lot of different shows and a lot of different content. And you could move quite easily back and forth between shows that could be real hip hop centric, or maybe more on the quote unquote Black consciousness side of things, to the alternative truth side of things. You're really a very kind of hermetic and mercurial character in that sense, moving between worlds. I've always liked that about you. And the other thing is that, and I know that you've had some reservations about being a public figure, and you're kind of a public figure in your own way, and you have found a way to create a niche for yourself without having kind of a centralized platform. So you're decentralized in a lot of ways, which is cool. You're a decentralized entity on the internet. And so first of all, I just want to give people kind of a background on Darren, and that's kind of and again, I think you're vital. I was over on Greg Carlwood's YouTube channel today. We're going to talk about this, and you were over there. You were commenting, and I brought your name up today, and somebody said, "Oh, I can't wait to hear what Dazzle Theory has to say." So you're in the game, man. You may not have a website, you may not have a podcast, but people know who you are, and they respect your opinions. So it's been a long time since I've had you on this show. And it just seemed like, we were going to do this anyway. And then all of a sudden, the Tracy Twyman bomb explodes. And why don't we start there? And first of all, I want to welcome you. And let's start with the Tracy Twyman bomb. Give people some background about your relationship with Tracy. I think that's really important.
My relationship with Tracy, as basically somebody that is interested and has always been interested in the alternative media, I like to send emails to people within the scene. It doesn't matter what type of profile they are. They could be high profile as David Icke, or they could just be somebody like somebody I found in Ohio, JJ, who has an amazing podcast called Operation GCD. And that's just people that have decided to use the tools available on the internet, the software, which generally is free, and you can create very good, high quality content. So I'm about originality. Does the person have something to say? So I remember listening to this woman, and women within the alternative research community are very few and far between. Obviously, there's your friend Emily Moyer of Off Planet Radio, but as a whole, it tends to be very, very male dominated. So when I heard this woman, and she had no arrogance, she had humility, but also a great vast knowledge of very obscure occult knowledge, going as far back as even antiquity. It very much impressed me, the two balance of a great intellect combined with humility. So I reached out to her, emailed her, came with my views and opinions on the podcast. It could have been Red Ice Radio at the time, before that went very white nationalist, when it was more about esoterica. And then she replied back, and we went back and forth, and that's how it basically started between us. I would give her ideas, because my own personal view with myself is one of the things that have inspired me to get into the alternative research community or the conspiracy theory community was watching a film as a child called Silkwood, which I believe Meryl Streep was involved. Was it Cher? I don't know. It was one of the two. And it was based on a true story about a woman that worked in an American nuclear processing power plant.
Right. And that, by the way, is in Kerr Canyon or Kerr County. Kerr County. Kerr County is where they just had the earthquake.
Okay.
So that's a very interesting just connection between the two. So I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, so keep going.
So I don't know who's the lead actress. Was it Cher or was it Meryl Streep?
Cher is in it. Meryl Streep is in it. And
okay.
Yeah. Karen Silkwood. And basically she was a whistleblower about what was going on. And and she eventually was contaminated. And there are people who have researched this and believe that she was poisoned in polonium, sort of a polonium sort of deal, and was ultimately taken out. But yeah, so Cher and Meryl Streep. So
I remember for some reason I got to watch this show very young. It was on the BBC, and I don't know if it was one of them things where your parents have been working all day on a Friday and they've just started to sleep on the sofa, and then I've woken up. And then whilst they've been sleeping, I've been watching this after the 10 p.m. news. And I must have been maybe 8 or 9. And it really did impact me as to corruption, as to the dangers of whistleblowing and the dangers of getting into it. So I've always been conflicted. In one way, I want to fight the power, but in another way, I realise that the power is the power. So what I try to do personally, I try to reach out to people like you, people like Operation GCD, people like Tracy Twyman, and other hosts of podcasts. And then I try to say, well, allow me to have a guest appearance. So I sort of hop in and hop out, and then I say my piece, and then I leave. Because the other reason why I don't get involved is that I am very good at communicating, and I know exactly, without sounding arrogant, I know exactly how to be entertaining, because the city that I'm from is a city of entertainers. It's well known. So we're
That's Liverpool, by the way. I didn't put that in my introduction about Darren. He's from Liverpool, of course, the home of the Beatles and much, much more.
Yeah, so a lot of Liverpool people are inspired by John Lennon. So obviously, we know what in the end happened to John Lennon, because obviously he was outspoken against your government, and then the doorman just happened to be part of a Cuban group of exiles who were a hit team for the CIA, who went round the world and they were killing people. So the doorman for the Dakota building was an undercover CIA assassin. So I just dip in and I just dip out of this because I realised, because one of the examples was a few years ago, we have a show called Question Time, which is on the BBC, and it's every week, and it's a panel of people within politics and one person from pop culture, and they were talking about manifestos, and people, this before Brexit, people were getting disillusioned with the political establishments in my country because they would say something in the manifesto, hype it up, have a big press conference before the general election, and then as soon as they get in, they just forget what was in the manifesto. So I just put my finger up. The host at the time, David Dimbleby, picked me out, and he says, "What do you want to say?" And I was like, "Well, why don't we make manifestos legally binding.
Mm-hmm.
And the panel were like, what did he say? And then I was talking about proportional representation and the need to bring what I would say chaos into the system. And because of that, just maybe 1 minute, maybe 1 minute 30, I was getting stopped in the streets in Liverpool for 3 weeks. And that proved to me the power of mainstream media and television, that you can have such a little bit on that, but if you hit and you're accurate and you're on point, people remember it. So it reinforced the notion of, I don't want a podcast, I don't want a blog, because I feel that this could happen. And now what's happened to somebody I consider a friend is sort of proof of that, but I'll elaborate why.
Yeah, before we get into that, the two little corrections here, or comments from the chat. It is Kern County, which is where Karen Silkwood was working out of. I got it confused with Kerrville and Kerr County, which is just down the road from my house. And then Paul brought up an interesting piece in the chat room about the Lennon that theoretically was killed. And was that even the real John Lennon, right? But I mean, that's a whole other kind of layer and wrinkle to this thing, which we don't really have a bunch of time to go down that rabbit hole. But Paul brought that up, and ultimately I think it's an interesting point, an interesting conversation, but maybe a different show. So let's get into the Tracy stuff. Now, what's interesting about the timing around all this is that you had actually reached out to Tracy to see if she would have me on her show. And this was about 3 weeks ago, roughly 3 or 4 weeks ago. And she said, well, no, I think we have all of our guests scheduled or whatever. But then what happened was that there's a group that supports Tracy and her show, and they started to reach out to me. And they said, well, we'd like to have you on, or, there was some kind of traction. And I didn't know Tracy well. She booked me one time for Clyde's show. We talked a little bit, and I certainly admired her research from a distance. I thought she was going into places and delving into things that very few people would go to, or had the esoteric scope. And let's be clear, I think Tracy was digging in some very dark matter, very, very dark matter. And I think that ultimately becomes part of the story. So let's pass it back to you, and let's continue this.
Well, Tracy was part of a collective called the RX Only Picture Show, and it was two men from Walla Walla in Washington State.
Right.
It was in the same part of the world where Tracy was, about an hour away, maybe 2 hours drive away. And it was SB and Jem, and they were long-time fans and admirers of Tracy, and they just did what I did. They just reached out to her, emailed, said there's this great thing called what you're doing right now, where you can live broadcast on YouTube. You can be at home, we can be in our place, and we can just have conversations every week. So Tracy then built up a level of communication with both of them. Then SB went down to where Tracy lived near Portland, and then they became friends, and she was regularly on the show every Wednesday. They would have different guests on, talking all types of esoterica. There was one lovely show about a man in Boston, round Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, and there's a tower, like a lighthouse.
Yep, we've covered that before. Yep, you keep going.
Yes, and some people believe that lighthouse was made by the Chinese, who went on a big global expedition. Other people believe it was Templar. Other people believe it was Viking. But this man, who has a museum, he's a photographer right next to this structure, believes it was made by Dr. John Dee. And it was a wonderful episode. and he was riffing with Tracy on a lot of John Dee, a lot of the occult aspects of John Dee. It was his involvement with Shakespeare, the play The Tempest. So it was a beautiful episode. Things started ratcheting up when Tracy then wanted to create a rebranded new website called Plus Ultra. And the pressure of that, combined with being a single mother, because as you know, Robert, people want new content all the time, because what occurs is there's people who have these thoughts, feelings and opinions, but they're in an echo chamber of one. The family doesn't want to know, because if they say something to their family, they'll be viewed as oddballs or eccentrics. They can't really say it to their friends because they worry that they might isolate the friends. Because we're now in a world where mental illness is more and more a daily occurrence, people are worried that they might be then viewed as mentally ill. So they go to people such as yourself, such as Operation GCD, such as Greg Carlwood, such as Off-Planet Radio, Off-Planet Media, and they bombard them, and then they need this new content as a catharsis, because then when you say something, they're like, right, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one in the world that feels this way. So because of that, and then the straw that broke the camel's back was a man called Isaac Cappy. Now, personally, this might sound snobbish, but as a person, I am about an appearance. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be wearing Italian suits and designer labels, but if you are talking about something really serious like Isaac Cappy was, such as Hollywood elites, and he named certain people within Hollywood that are involved in human trafficking of children and adrenochrome, I believe, what Hunter S. Thompson talked about. You have to have a certain professionalism, and you have to look the certain part. And when I saw Cappy, I saw somebody that looked like Sideshow Bob out of The Simpsons.
Yep. Let's put just a dash on that comment for a second. I just put a link in the chat room, and the tower that Darren is referring to is the D Tower, which is in Rhode Island. And Steve and Chris and I covered that probably about, I don't know, maybe about 6 weeks, 2 months ago. Very, very in-depth stuff. So I put that link in the chat room if you guys want to follow up on that and learn more about it, because a lot of you guys watch this show, but some of you may have missed that one. And it's a very interesting kind of journey that we did with John Dee and Bacon and all those people. And Isaac Cappy, I was very dubious of Isaac Cappy from day one. Okay, I did his chart. I could see what he was into. I could see the flashpoint that was taking place in his life. And he had to be very, very careful. And I think he was very unmoored, unsettled. And I think his motivations were really, really mixed. And then I started to watch him. You know, he had that one kind of explosive Periscope show, which I did not think was all that revelatory, by the way. I mean, the one thing that he talked about was his relationship with Seth Green and Seth Green's wife, and kind of outing them, which I felt, even though if it was right to do, it was kind of almost like a Judas-like act in some ways. He was sacrificing his own relationship with Hollywood and friends and his inner circle. And, you know, that's okay. I mean, sometimes you have to do that stuff. I get it, right? But then he was talking about Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg, and that wasn't all that revelatory for people who've been following this stuff. And I felt like he was kind of piggybacking on this moment where he was outing, you know, his quote-unquote 2 longtime friends. And that got him a lot of publicity very, very quickly. He connected with Fiona Barnett, who at that time was also starting to kind of come out and break her story. It was, you know, through people like Nathan Stoltman over on Lift the Veil, a few other channels. And then Fiona and Isaac apparently started to, you know, kind of collaborate and do their thing. But I began to watch subsequent kind of periscopes that Isaac Cappy would do, and they were terrible. They were really bad. It was like an actor in search of a plot line. That's what it felt like. And then somewhere between those moments where I dropped him and was not very interested, and then whatever happened to him in Arizona, something weird, bizarre, dark took place with his life. And I came out and I took a very unpopular stance, which was I don't think he was prepared to do what he did. I didn't trust his motivation. And I think that this is what Tracy actually came to, by the way, was that he was muddying the waters. And I think he was. And I took a lot of heat for it. People on this side on the other side of the screen with this show were pretty supportive. But that was kind of the position that I evolved to with Isaac Cappy, and that may or may not sync up with yours, but clearly from an image standpoint, an appearance standpoint, he was definitely sloppy, right? I mean, that's what you're inferring.
Well, I want people to realize this is what I'm going to say is quite a big statement, but one of the things I have found through my research with this country and our political and military establishment, we are run by collectors that are out of Oxford and Cambridge universities, so much so that the term Oxbridge has been created to describe people in top elite positions in politics, in business, and in the military sector, basically known as the military industrial sector. And one of the first things people in Oxford and Cambridge who wish to serve in this sector are given are the works of Machiavelli. So what we have to realise is that we have people who are skilled at manipulation and skilled at trying to create false avenues, dead ends, and even trying to drag people down, maybe with the name of creating mental illness. Right. An example of how wicked the system has become was last year in Rolling Stone magazine. MIT announced they had created a psychotic AI of Norman. And in the words, I went to the MIT website, in their words, they tormented the AI with images of death and torture.
Right.
For champ. So
the machine learned this AI and flooded it with all these cruel, psychopathic, inhuman images, plotline stories, so that they could create a psychopathic AI, which is what they did.
Yeah, and that AI is named Norman after Norman Bates.
Right.
So we have a system that is truly sophisticated and truly evil. If you want to use a pop culture narrative or example, it would be like the Emperor out of Star Wars that has an occultic base, but then uses high technology to implement that. So this is where we're going. So Tracy, from what I gathered, she got like hooked into Cappy and she was convinced, and then she started dialogue with him, and then he obviously mysteriously dies in Arizona, and then that connects with an area of Arizona in which an individual was sending threats to her prior to the death of Cappy around this dark net selling of children on a global basis. So if you've got an AI system that is truly sophisticated, and we know through Edward Snowden's revelations that Brennan.
I don't think Edward Snowden can be trusted, by the way. I think he's an inside guy. I just need to get that out front. But.
What I will say is there's a man called Brennan, who was CIA.
Right, John Brennan, head of the CIA. Yep.
John Brennan, former head of the CIA, and he went to GCHQ and he gave a lecture, and his main throwaway line was, "We now have the ability to record everything on everyone. Right. Get to it."
Yeah. So I mean, people who have been in this field for a long time, and I mean since the 90s. This is when I really started to, get my shovel out and start digging. You found out about guys like Danny Casolaro and the Promise software. And at that time, it was something that was like very controversial, had been stolen from him, and then brought into the government, patent theft, whole 9 yards. And that was a software that was in these times, that software is now primitive. But what it was doing, it was looking at keywords, right? It could grab keywords and bring in tranches of data. And that was in the mid 90s, okay? The mid 90s, 95, 96, 97, right around there, 98. Think about where we are now and how sophisticated that has become. And so, to your point, Brennan is absolutely right. He's absolutely right. But this has been going on for a while now, quite a while. And the thing that really changed the landscape was the Patriot Act. And once the Patriot Act happened, they could basically spy on anybody. That's what happened. You can get the FISA warrants and all FISA warrants and all that stuff. And sometimes, as we saw with Trump and the Russiagate, getting those things is really slippery. You don't have to have a lot of data, or you don't have to have a lot of base or solid evidence in order to get those warrants. And I think now it's rampant. There's backdoors with everything. So I'm sorry, I kind of went on a rant there, but this stuff has been going on a while. And when Edward Snowden came out and basically told everybody, it was, in some ways, it was almost insulting. And I think for the common person, Edward Snowden played a kind of a role. I think he played a role, but he wasn't really disclosing much. It wasn't like he was really giving up the real goods or the real secrets. It was kind of like, we're going to give you a little bit of this, the revelation of the method. That's what it felt like to me. So but now, to your point, Brennan did say that, yes.
So now we have a nice symmetry where I talked about Isaac Cappy possibly being a double agent,
right?
The use of Machiavellian tactics. You then said the same with Snowden. And now we come to a connection where there was a historical economist called Anthony C. Sutton. And Sutton, due to his extensive research, there's numerous interviews with him available on YouTube.
He's amazing. Anthony Sutton's he's the best.
From the late 70s and 1980s.
Yeah, he's the best. Yeah.
Sutton almost hints that this America versus USSR, which is now Russia, is kabuki theatre.
Right.
And at the top level, it's designed to entrap, confuse, and demoralize humanity for the profit and advantage of a chosen few. Mm-hmm. And Sutton has managed throughout his years, when he was alive, to give extensive evidence in terms of documentation. One of his triumphs was proving that American multinational firms were actually in Germany during World War II. An example of this being IBM, being Ford, being Coca-Cola, and other types of firms. One example was during D-Day, when American troops landed in northern France and they were taking German vehicles such as jeeps and trucks. They realised that these vehicles had Ford motor engines in them.
Yeah, well, the Soviets with their tanks also were American-based tanks. The Soviets were getting the same thing from the American industrialists. So the American industrialists were basically providing infrastructure and hardware for both sides. And in fact, if they did not do that for Stalin, Stalin doesn't beat Hitler on the Eastern Front, because some of Stalin's tanks were really, really good. And why were they good? They were American chassis, American frames, and American tracks. They made Stalin's tanks way better. So Sutton talks about this and how both sides were provided with enough infrastructure to create an even playing field on some level with the battle. So you're absolutely right about that.
And even on a segue, the emblem of Russia is a double-faced eagle. So an eagle that looks one way and then another head that looks the other way. And that symbol is used within Freemasonry.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of deep symbolism. So there's games within games within games. And what occurs when you are a researcher like Tracy, you want to get to the truth. That is your passion. That is your DNA. But because you're dealing with people who read Machiavelli and Plato, and they're part of a powerful structure with money and means and agents, you can get confused. And I think what occurred was um, she got involved with Cappy in terms of digital communication, email, and then this then created a tax against her that previously in 2018 she suffered before knowing Cappy, and then for whatever reason she came back online. But then due to a contact with Cappy, it started again. There's a very important monologue that Tracy produced that's still available online called The Twyman Trip, The Internet is Compromised, in which she talks about her 2018 experience. One of the things she tried to ask of me was she wanted me to go to the police, or she even wanted me to go to representatives of MI5 about what she had discovered.
This is Tracy. She came to you and said that she wanted you to go to these various authorities.
Yeah, and she said that she was willing to send me zip files of the documentation and evidence that she had. And she wanted me to go to the British authorities as a representative, and then she would go to the American federal authorities.
This is for a guy that won't even have a website. I mean, come on, you got to think through this, right? I mean,
well, what it is because Tracy, because Tracy's a mother, and she's a mother of a 5-6-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And then she's seeing children of that age being basically born. So
I totally get it. She's a mama bear and she's wanting to protect her kid and other kids. I totally get it.
Yeah, but I told her because obviously, as you know, we had the revelation in this country of a man called Sir Jimmy Savile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was the revelation of the method. I still don't know why the authorities revealed it. The only thing I can speculate is that Savile did something to upset somebody.
He's dead, and he's dead now, and he can take the fall, right? He can be the unholy pinata. You know, he could be the scapegoat for a very, very dark system which still exists.
I don't think he is the scapegoat. I understand where you're coming from. Sorry, I think what it was, it's a revelation of the method.
Sure.
And yes, I think he wasn't a scapegoat.
But he is now, because he could take the sin of the other people who are still perpetrating what Jimmy Savile was deeply involved in.
I know the British establishment is just that, it's an establishment. Mm-hmm. So for that to be revealed and for him to be so hardwired with the BBC, the British royal family, the charitable sector, the National Health Service, it shows that this is what they do. And the man on the street now views all of them sectors that I've just mentioned as having now people that operate like Savile. Mm-hmm. So either it was a foreign country that wished to maybe destabilize Britain, that had the money and the resources to make this go public, or Jimmy Savile did something to somebody that powerful that they couldn't abide, even in death, him being seen as this working class national hero. So mm-hmm. their attitude was like, I'm prepared to burn our reputation just to get him back. Mm-hmm. So because of Savile, everybody's now gone to something dark in our entertainment industry, in our political industry, in our national healthcare provider, and in our monarchy. So because of that knowledge and that feeling now since Savile within our society, I told Tracy, I said, they're the people that are perpetrating this. So how can I go to the people that are perpetrating it and expressing it? An example recently in your country, I'll have to like dig it out in a minute, is that there's been two senators. One is a female who's a former spook and a Democrat,
Right.
and a man who's Republican.
Yeah, they're both dead. They're both dead. Yeah.
No, not dead. They are creating a bill which will look at child pornography.
Oh, so this is not the two that just passed away recently connected to the Clintons. Okay, they're different. Okay.
No, these two, I will get the name for you now. These two individuals are looking at child pornography being used in the DOD. And they want to create a new body that will look at it, because Anderson Cooper of CNN done a famous 2012 report that showed that the Pentagon was storing, and also people were looking at vast amounts of child pornography. And this CNN report was never followed up by Anderson Cooper. So now these two, let me just dig out.
While you're looking for that, I just gotta throw this out there. Sue's in the chat just posted something really interesting. But apparently, there's a woman on YouTube who is putting together a lot of information that suggests that Isaac Cappy is not dead, and I think that that's quite possible, because when that whole thing happened, I mean, it's like we just don't know. Right? We don't know. We don't know. We can speculate. I can draw up a chart. I can have my own kind of insights, but we don't know. We don't know what happens to these people. And that was one of the things that we talked about when Isaac Cappy theoretically died. We don't know. But this is what we hear. But anyway, I just want to put that out there. Apparently somebody is putting together a body of evidence that says he's actually alive still. I wouldn't surprise me.
Well, if we have a system where they're making psychotic AIs, and the Pentagon is one of the world's biggest hoarders and then also viewers of child pornography, I guess anything's possible. So the two people who are creating this bipartisan bill to stop child pornography on the DOD's network is Abigail Spanberger, who is a Democrat and a former spook, and a Republican called Mark Meadows from North Carolina. The thing that you need to look for is from Zero Hedge, and that was from the 3rd of July, 2019, and the title is Lawmakers Target Pentagon Pedophiles, Bipartisan Child Porn Bill. And then ABC57.com, I think that's a regional ABC affiliate in America. Their title is Bipartisan Bill Aims to Stop Child Pornography Trafficking on Defense Department Networks. So that again is Abigail Spanberger and Mark Meadows. And Mark Meadows is a very, very pro-Trump, pro-MAGA. He said a lot of things against Mueller and against James Comey, and Spanberger was sort of neutral on that, but she was more leaning to, well, we might need impeachment hearings. So for them two to come together, it shows how serious it is. And then Spanberger, Abigail Spanberger, she is a former spook. So there's something going on.
Well, I think it's, again, are we dealing with something that's actually real, valid, has legs, or are we dealing with more kabuki? Because what's happening is that the public is waking up. The public, a lot of people say, well, it might be too little too late, or, are they really? We are waking up. And when people wake up, when the masses stir, there are generally programs, or there are generally operations that can funnel the awakening, right? We can do things that look like, on the one hand, we're actually doing something, but really what we're really doing is we're just kind of moving the herd into another direction. So if it really has teeth, great. if it's one of these things that's being set up so that it looks very officious, it looks like something's getting done, and really all it's doing is kind of, overseeing what's gone on in the past, well, remains to be seen. And this gets into the discussion you and I were having, off camera before the show. And I brought up, there was a court scene in Youngstown, Ohio, where this guy killed this woman, the children. When I say children, these are grown children, big children. They're in the courtroom. The guy gets sentenced, and after he gets sentenced, the children, to the young guys, they go berserk, and they bum rush the court. They go in, they start pounding the crap out of this dude, and it's like this is like a new level of chaos that's really becoming more and more prevalent in our society here. I don't know about England, but certainly in our society here. And it's a breakdown of the social structure, because people are, and you and I agreed on this before we got on the air, people are not feeling like they're just due or justice is being done. And there's a rising feeling of this. And so I think that, to your point, with whatever's happening with Mark Meadows and Bamberger, it's like, are they doing the real thing? Is this the real deal? Or is this just another kind of officious operation to, mollify the masses? Remains to be seen.
I think it's genuine, because, as I said, Anderson Cooper did this report in 2011.
But do you really trust Anderson, CIA, and then Cooper? Well,
there was a great Seymour Hersh article in the London Review of Books, which I think is the finest article I've ever read, by a journalist called Military to Military. And in it, Seymour Hersh has access to the top generals in Virginia, and he's talking to them. And there are two sides within the American military. There's a side that wants World War III against Russia, and there's another side that believes they're insane. But both sides have equal amounts of power and can't take the other one on. So they're using proxies, and they're using other nations to sort of counter each other. So an example being that there were sides within the Obama administration that were desperate to start this, with Syria being the reason. A redux version of World War I in Sarajevo. And then the other side thought they were insane. So then they were then giving information to the Russians via, of all people, the Swiss and the Germans, to make them aware of what this side was doing. So then Putin could then counter it. So we are in this strange type of world. This is one of the reasons, another segue, why the show Game of Thrones was so popular, because what it showed was 4 or 5 competing sides that were trying to eliminate each other.
All of them were psychopathic.
So Jon Snow wasn't, but some of them were. But that's the reason why it resonated with a global audience.
And who wound up being the king? It was the young psychopath, right?
No, the person that ended up being the king was the mystic one, who was chosen democratically by a council of the remaining houses, and they agreed that the kingdom should not be passed on via a bloodline. It should be passed on via a vote of the noble houses to who was the most suitable. And this individual, Bran, had the gift of being able to see everything in the past, the present, and the future. So in effect, he voted a demigod in the role of ruler. So therefore, the psychopaths couldn't do the job, because he would eliminate them before they would obviously do what they needed to do. So it was a counter to the Machiavellian tactics that we had seen throughout the seasons. So that was one of the reasons why Game of Thrones was very popular, because it resonated with what we are seeing: Russia versus China, metropolitan liberals versus patriots, straight versus LGBT, young versus baby boomer. So we're seeing all of these frictions. So that was one thing that unified everyone.
And all of which are mostly artificial constructs, by the way, as well, right?
Maybe some of them are artificial as constructs. I always think that there will always be a tension because there needs to be that. I remember, again, on another segue, there was a lot of tension in the band Funkadelic between
a little tension.
Yeah, between Bootsy Collins and George Clinton.
George Clinton. Speaking of psychopaths, George Clinton is a class 1 psychopath.
Well, what we then have is we have Bootsy Collins, then obviously versus George Clinton, and because you have that type of tension, it then creates this amazing type of music.
But Bootsy was lucky to get out of that band alive, because if you look at the people who are in that band, littered with death, littered with addiction. I mean, like a really heavy scene. So Bootsy was very fortunate, and maybe that has to do with his talent and his moxie, because he was able to transcend Funkadelic, and a lot of the other people weren't. Maybe him and Bernie Worrell, and Bernie Worrell's dead now too. Yeah, but intense, crazy, not a great guy. Sorry, he's not a great guy.
So this is one of the things, people that are watching this, my mind is very random, very unique. So some people say, what about Tracy? What about Tracy? The only thing I can say, the best source of information about Tracy Twyman is a friend from the RX Only Picture Show, SB, and he is available on Twitter. Now, his handle is all lowercase, and it's very simple. It's spelled SEWNEO. That again is SEWNEO. And about an hour ago, Sean gave an extensive Twitter thread explaining what he had found out about Tracy. He said that the family has made contact with him, but they've said not to divulge what happened. But then, according to what he said that the details surrounding her death are a convoluted mystery. So in time, because I know SB, I communicate with them via a Discord group, and then also via a Twitter DM and Twitter. He does plan to have a YouTube show. I will hopefully be part of that show, and he will basically, what he can say, he will. Now, what has occurred as a controversial matter that I have to put my hat in the ring and I have to make a decision, that the respected alternative researcher Steve Outram, who had done great work with Jan Irving around the origins of the Burning Man Festival, had footage from Tracy that she distributed to a number of people in the alternative research community. I was not privy to this. This came as a shock to me. And Steve correctly, again, in my opinion, released it because he believed it was known as a dead man switch.
Right.
Tracy done it, so if anything occurred to her, it would be released on the internet, predominantly.
Right. Yep. And we talked about that video yesterday, Emily and I, when we did our show. And I put that video up on Facebook and I put it up on BitChute because at the very least, if that's what her work was about, then that video should theoretically honor her work. It should be her legacy in some ways, right? And that's why I posted it. Now I went to Greg Carlwood's 25-minute sort of discourse on this thing, and he is against it. And the reason he's against is because his buddy is in there. Kyle is in this video, and he doesn't want his buddy Kyle to be tarred and feathered. And I, as somebody who was my friend, I'd probably be very protective as well. But on the other hand, Tracy risked her life for, and you may think that she was foolhardy or brave or whatever, but she risked her life for this stuff. And whether his friend is in there or not, I think that video has to get out. That's my 2 cents. And I understand where Greg is coming from, but the very least, this should be the thing that her work would culminate in, sadly.
I think what the alternative research community or the conspiracy theory community has to use this as is a wake-up call. You have to understand this ain't no joke. We are talking about power systems. We are talking about using the tools that they have given us, what you're talking right now, to spread thought and inception into the masses. That means you become a threat. That means somewhere along the line, you, Robert, and me, we're most probably on some government's blacklist.
Oh, dude, don't even get me started. I had a run between 2008 and 2010 that I don't talk a lot about, but it was nightmarish.
Yeah.
2008, 2011, it was nightmarish. You know, I don't get into it, but I was clearly targeted during that time, and it made my life a living hell.
I have recently had something in my own community, I don't want to divulge about it, where I have talked to people within the public sector about the improvements of my community, nothing alternative research or conspiracy related. And yeah, Darren, we'll work with you. That's a great idea. That's very insightful. Then all of a sudden, I'm persona non grata. Emails aren't answered. I then email them to say, well, I've sent you the email. You said you were keen on it. Let's have a follow-up meeting. And again, nothing responds. So I believe that obviously they've obviously got my files, and people might say, oh, that's baloney. If people want to look at a British actor called Ricky Tomlinson, who was on the hit sitcom show, The Royal Family, which was the British version of Married with Children. He was a trade unionist before becoming an actor in the 1970s. And he was part of an MI5 covert blacklist that to this day, the British government will not release. And because he was on the blacklist, he had to become an actor to feed himself. So he's now used his fame as a means of revealing about this MI5 government blacklist of men in construction.
Mm-hmm.
So this might still be going on today, hence why various British governments of different political ideologies will not allow him. So then that goes back to the Anthony C. Sutton thing, where is it again kabuki theatre?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sutton gets into this. The foundation, the tabula rasa of Sutton's work was when he basically was conscripted by Stanford University to look at the nature of power and government, okay? He was a professor at Stanford University, and that journey took him into Skull and Bones. And when he got into Skull and Bones, he looked at the membership list, and the membership list was split almost 50-50, liberal and conservative. And he realized that what they were doing is they were generating these agents that would play these various roles on both sides. And then out of that comes the Hegelian dialectic, which again, Sutton is the guy that really popularizes that. So he sees Skull and Bones as the template for everything. Then he gets into the relationship between the United States and Germany and Russia and all that stuff. And he's seeing this on a kind of a global scale. And it was interesting. I was talking with my buddy Mark over on Facebook today, and Mark he's pretty dialed in politically. He's getting invited to like this, conservative forum and stuff like that. And he knows people. And apparently George Papadopoulos, the guy who was kind of run up in front of Mueller and this whole Russiagate thing, Papadopoulos is going around saying that the next version of the New World Order will be a combination of Russia, China, the United States, and Israel. And I thought about that. I'm like, wow, that's really, really interesting. That these forces that theoretically are either opposing one another or have these trade agreements that they're not happy with. And I thought that actually makes sense. And this is based on your kabuki theory that you're talking about.
So
right?
what's occurred with Greg is that he's created this platform because he used to work in a well-known American chain that sells console games.
He was a GameStop employee. That's where he comes from.
Yeah, so because of that, he then decided, I want a new change, I want to promote people. So he created a platform called the Higher Side Chats, in which he promotes, say, weed culture, which is something I disagree with.
I'm with you on that. I don't agree with it either.
I like the oil. I think the oil is good, and I think you can use it for food, but I'm not into the smoking of it because of the damage to the lungs. Your lungs are not supposed to take in smoke. It's supposed to take in air, not smoke. But that's another matter. So I'm not against the use of hemp. I'm not against the use of cannabis, but I'm not into the smoking of it because it's called dope for a reason, people. That's what it's called dope for. So Greg promotes stoner culture, and then he also promotes people to come on his show and basically talk. Because Red Ice Radio went far right and went white nationalist rather than esocentric.
I think Henrik went white identitarian. I don't think he went white nationalist because he got kicked out of his country. Now he's in this country, but I think the proper term with Henrik is identitarian. But keep going.
Well, because Henrik went that way in terms of his ideology, which is his right to do.
Right.
There was a niche in the market, and Greg filled that niche that Red Ice Radio had left. And I first had reservations because Greg is from San Diego, and San Diego is the home of the United States Navy. As we know through Jordan Maxwell's work, maritime law runs us all. And then obviously the best spooks are naval spooks. Ian Fleming even made James Bond a naval agent to prove this. So Mark Gray is, again, somebody I don't like, who tries to enlighten people by humiliating people. Go figure.
Mark Gray?
Yeah. Oh, Mark Dice, sorry, not
Dice.
Mark Gray.
It didn't sound like Mark Gray.
Sorry, Mark Gray. I know you.
Mark Dice is a kind of a satirist and wants to show how stupid people are. Keep going.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Mark Gray. Mark Gray is a lovely person. It's Mark Dice.
Right.
So Mark Dice, who's an affiliate of Alex Jones, he falls in and out with Alex Jones. Well, he's created this type of following where he'll go on the main beach in San Diego, the boardwalk, and he will ask millennials about geopolitics and geography. And obviously millennials aren't into that. So whilst he's trying to raise the obvious, he's using humiliation to do it. So at first, because Greg was from San Diego, he's promoting stoner.
Actually, Greg is originally from St. Louis.
Okay.
Right? But he lives in San Diego now.
All right then. Well, he's living in San Diego, established there.
Yeah.
And he's in a place that is known for a den of snakes and vipers.
I used to live in San Diego. It is military all the way up to your freaking third eye. You got the Air Force, you have the Army, you have the Navy, and they're all concentrated in about a, 80 mile square area, right? And heavily.
So you have this place that you've lived in that is heavily militarized, and then you've got this young man who is talking like against the system. Like that is like Daniel and the Lions. Then I'm not saying that's possible, but I'm saying that if Tracy Twyman went through her internet being sophisticated, hacked, and to the point where she would be going on general mainstream news sites and false information would be coming up. So in a way, it would mean that she would be out of sync with time. So when she would be talking to people, they'd be like, that didn't happen, this happened. It was very sophisticated. So then she would have to look at somebody else's internet somewhere else to join the dots to realise she was part of a sophisticated hack. So if she can have all of this in her own words again, Twyman trip, the internet is compromised, that monologue is available on YouTube, then to me, Greg has never had that. So at first I was a bit like, what's going on there? But maybe he's Daniel in the Lions, then maybe he's protected. It is possible.
No, he sound terrified on that YouTube video that he just put up. He was holding back levels of grief and terror simultaneously. That's what it felt like.
I don't think that was terror. I just think what that was, as he says in his own words, people are questioning him. And what I think it is, say he is Daniel in the Lions then, and he's managed to go live right under the nose of the military industrial complex in one of their main hives, which is San Diego. What he has done is he's created a platform, but he's viewed it, I think, as entertainment.
That I would agree with completely. And I think there's a level of naivete there.
Whereas Henrik has always viewed it as this is serious. Right. In the manner that Henrik puts his views across, he is deadly serious. You like him, you don't like him. From the very beginning, the esoteric stuff, the mystic stuff, to now, like it all over, he's always been dead on. And the thing is that Greg has now realised that like what I had as a child, but more poignant and visceral, that Sharon Silkwood moment. And the other thing with the alternative research community, a few years ago, I went to a UFO conference that was based in Liverpool. And I offered to help out and stuff. I said, well, I'll help out and show people where the restaurants are and where the ATMs are if you let me in. So then they said, okay, then we'll let you in for half of the session. So eventually I got round and they let me in for all of it. And I would be guiding people like a tourist guide to Liverpool. Yep. Some of the people of the audience were ordinary people who just watched Ancient Aliens and then got into it. Another type was very serious, into the Bob Lazar stuff, into the physics, etc. Right. And then the other side, we had tie-dye crew with like rainbow-coloured hair who looked like they were on day release. Right. And this is the thing with this culture. It attracts all three types of sectors. Mm-hmm. And what has happened, according to what Greg is saying, his friend has possibly had underlying mental health issues. And because of his contact with Tracy, it brought it out to the fact that his friend needed to be sectioned. So,
well, hold on a second. Let's be clear. His friend was sectioned. I don't think he makes the connection that it happened through Tracy, but he does allude to the fact that this Kyle person did have some issues. He does talk about that. But I don't think the two, like I think the section predated his connection with Tracy. I could be wrong. That's what I got from the video. What I also got from the video though, and maybe you picked this up, but this is what I got. He got really, really close to blaming Tracy in that video. And he got really close by saying, well, she was involved in something very, very dark. And this is what happens when you get involved with something very, very dark. You put your hand near the fire, you get burned. And I heard that, right? This is what I was hearing on that video. And I thought, you've got to be very careful when you get to that point, because it's almost like, and I understand what he's saying, but it's almost like you're blaming the victim here. It's like Tracy should have known better, right? Well, she should have known better. See, this is what happens. And my friend is now screwed up because of this, right? Well, and I think it's a fine line that he was treading there in that moment.
Well, I just think what it is, it's the highest side chatters his livelihood. You know, he's hanging around with Eddie Bravo and Sam Tripoli. And then obviously if you hang around with them two, you're then close, you're one removed from Rogan. And then if he was to go on Joe Rogan's show, that would be the thing that would give him additional income. So he's got to look at it like this. He's recently married, so we might have plans to start a family. But in Greg's defense, because one of the things I'm truth to power, and I will send this myself to Greg Carlwood in a link. Greg's statement is called A Statement from Greg Carlwood Regarding the Tragic Loss of Tracy Twyman, and that was published on the 12th of July 2019, right. And it is available on his own YouTube channel, The Higher Side Chat.
And I even commented, I even said the same thing I just said to you right now on that channel and on that post. So I'm not saying anything that I haven't put directly onto his YouTube channel. And I think we have to just be very careful about blaming Tracy for what happened and the material she's in. Yeah, we got to take responsibility for it, but just, that's a hot rail you don't want to ride.
And Greg knows my feelings around the San Diego issue, because I, in a bit of a ironic, like sort of clever way, I questioned him because he was in San Diego. So then that stopped him and me communicating on Facebook. So he very well knows what I'm about. I've asked to be on his platform to talk, and he regularly knocks me back to talk about it. So this isn't about me going on his show. This is about me being open and telling the people what my context is with him, my views of him. But what I go back to is not that he could be a spook or whatever. My thing is, this is not entertainment. And if you have a platform, if you now have a blog, if you regularly make YouTube channels about conspiracy, combining with the geopolitical structure, because that is basically, again, going back to the Emperor in Star Wars, that is the system that we have. We have an ancient system that is transformed and melded into a high-tech, digital, sophisticated system, hence Skull and Bones. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look at the rituals of Skull and Bones. That goes back to Masonry, to the Templars. And now Skull and Bones are one of the most influential cults or pseudo-religions or religions in the world. Masonry goes back to the Templars, even possibly before that, ancient Egypt. Mm-hmm. We still got Freemasons today. Oh. So what we have to do is we have to really be aware of it. I am all for Greg putting this out, because ultimately Steve Outram put it out, and I am glad that Greg has done it, because the thing is, Tracy needs to be remembered. And whilst there's eyes on the target, and whilst people say are grieving, and Greg's in a way right, it might not be the best time to do it. Ironically, for somebody that looked at mystery, Tracy Twyman has now become a mystery. And that is like the ultimate irony to it, and it's tragic. And the thing I feel sorry for is she leaves a 6-year-old son. But if people want to know more about her, the best place to go is on YouTube, the RX Only Picture Show. There's, I think, over maybe 30, 40 episodes of Tracy on it. I'm on one of them, talking about the rapper 21 Savage and Mac the Knife and the meaning of that. And the person, again, for your listeners to get the best information about Tracy is SB, who is let me just get his name. I'm sorry. It's just when you're talking about somebody that you regularly communicated with, it's So Sean's it's just that brain freeze. Sorry, viewers. Sean's Twitter is SEWNEO, and he is available on Twitter. And if you follow him on Twitter, he will give you the latest updates, what he has an hour ago around Tracy. And I feel personally a bit guilty because on the 21st of April, Tracy sent me an email to state that her life was under threat and possibly that of a child. She wouldn't give me any more specifics as to who was threatening, why this was happening. The only thing she said was, once this was over, if it was over and she got through it, she would tell me and also the general public. So that never happened. And then the end of the email was a response to me giving her some technical advice on the layout of her new website. And then she came out to say that if she needs advice, she will ask for it. and she
That's good.
And she saw my advice as maybe demeaning her. And what has happened to me the past 12 months to 14 months is I have had incidents with various women in which I have given advice. And because we're living in a world of women's liberation and women's lib, that women now are hesitant to be given and accepting advice from a man because they believe that that either belittles them or that means that the man views them as inferior. So I've had advice where I've had a female friend who was wanting to move to a specific part of Liverpool. I told her not to go to that part of Liverpool, instead to go to another and then view certain properties in the area that she wanted to live. She ended up living in a death trap that was condemned by the local authority. And now she's living in another part of the city that isn't very pleasant. And now she's ignoring me because I was the one that told her not to do what she wanted to do.
So the key to this is a really thing. It has nothing to do with Tracy, but I just want to share something with that exact strategy or dynamic. Anytime you want to give advice to somebody, you or anybody that's watching this, all you have to do is ask the person, would you like my advice or would you like my opinion? And they have the right in that moment to say no. They can say no. No, Darren, I don't want to hear your advice. Or they can say yes. And when they say yes, now you have a contractual agreement. And what you're sharing comes in at a different level and at a different angle. And it's just really, really basic fundamental stuff between two people, agreement and consent. So you can do what you're doing. You just have to ask for their agreement.
Well, what I'm doing now, I'm not asking anyone for anything. Everyone can go to hell. So that's my opinion.
Okay, well, that's your strategy.
I'm not begging no one.
It's not begging. It's not begging.
No, well, I think it is. I just think that. But going back to my point, another example with women is that I was with a female friend. We went to visit a mutual friend in the south of England. We had a tyre blew on the motorway, on the highway. A recovery crew came, took us to their garage just a mile away off the highway, fixed the problem, and then instead of going northbound back to Liverpool, as she drives, she went the southbound. So I had Google Maps on in the passenger seat. I said, let's take this junction and then just whip around and then go northbound back to the direction we're going. She doesn't listen and she ends up passing 5 junctions. I then realised what occurred was she had been upset by a man in a shop just before we set out. Mm-hmm. So what it was, we had 1 junction left before we would have entered a major city. So I told her, I said, if you want to miss this junction, you're paying for the hotel tonight. And then eventually she then got out of this women's girl power, you don't tell me what to do, man. You're a man, you don't tell me what to do. And she just took the junction and went back. And then as we were driving, after about an hour, she apologised. And she said, I'm sorry for that, Darren. That man just put me in a bad mood. So because I've been dealing with these type of dynamics. Now, when Tracy on the 21st of April sent me that email, and in the past, I've given her a lot of advice that she appreciated. I then said, well, F you as well, because I've had enough of dealing with this women and this arrogance and this belief.
Darren, it sounds like you need to be more in the driver's seat, less in the passenger seat, telling people where to go. I'm just throwing that out there, okay?
Well, I'm just me. You know what I mean? I'm just me. I don't.
No, I get it. But there's a dynamic there, right? You're giving Tracy directions. You're giving this gal directions, but you're not in the driver's seat.
Yeah, but
it's like maybe get in the driver's seat and pilot the vehicle for
maybe.
And that way you don't have to tell anybody what to do. I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, maybe, but this is why this conversation's good, because this conversation shows that we're being human. Yeah. And I'm admitting my fault. So if Greg is watching this, I'm not saying I'm holier than thou. I have my faults. I have my arrogance.
We all do.
I am a Leo. I think what I say is law and what I say is just, and I am the king of the jungle and everyone else must bow before me. I have them negatives, but going back to my point, why I feel guilty is because I was like, well, F you, that was my energy to her. Yeah, that was my last energy. And then what happened yesterday morning on the 11th?
That's hard. I mean, that's a hard kind of piece to go through, right? I mean, your last interaction with Tracy was F you because she didn't take
internally. I never wrote that.
No, but internally, I mean, but you know that, right? You're living with that, right? You had an F you moment with her because you felt that she wasn't taking you seriously, right? With your direction, like she was
seriously, not just appreciative.
Appreciative,
like being very arrogant, being very like this neo-feminist vibe going on.
Okay, but now you have to live with that, right? Because now she's not around.
Yeah, I feel I was crying a lot of yesterday because
there's something in there in a big way for people. So this is something you're bringing to the table that might be the most important thing we're talking about today.
Yeah, because she sent me that, and I was just like, not another one, not another belligerent woman. I can't be dealing with this. I said, I'm a nice guy. I take time. I don't have to send these emails of encouragement and insight and source material. I've got a life to live. I can be spending it with friends and people, but I think she's worth it. I was even talking to her before April about me visiting her for Thanksgiving. Like what the plan was going to be was I was going to fly over, get a motel near to where she lived, spend Thanksgiving with her, do a show, go to Walla Walla, do a show, the RX Only Picture show, and then fly from Portland to see you. And that was going to be my plans for this year. And she was all for it. And then I think because maybe she realised maybe her living conditions weren't great, because it was just her and my son in a very small apartment. And then maybe there's things that are seasonal. She realised that summer would be the best time. So she said, if you want to visit me, come in the summer. So I've always wanted to experience Thanksgiving in America, seeing NFL, Thanksgiving Day, all the games over NFL Turkey. I've always wanted to do that vibe. So I wanted to do that. And then, the last communication was, she sent that to me and I was just like, F you as well. So then yesterday morning on Facebook, Steve Outrim, who I have met in December last year when he visited the UK, I took him around Liverpool. He was sending me messages about Tracy, but he thought I was in the loop. So I still had this FU vibe about her. And then I said, you know what, something happened. I remember the first part of the April 21st email she sent me. And then I went on Twitter and then I seen it from Clyde Lewis that she had passed. Mm-hmm. So then it hit me, man. It hit me hard because I felt guilty about having that animosity or that vibe towards her. Then I realised from last year what she was involved in. It sort of touched me as well. I had that side of people trying to interfere with me, but I am a connector, I'm a networker. I know a lot of people in IT. I know a lot of people that work for different governmental departments, actually, who are friends around the world. So if anybody was to ever interfere with me, there'd be people skilled in IT and diplomacy using them resources in the diplomatic sphere, in the corporate private sphere, and they would find out who was hacking me. So, and some of them would work together, and then I would have some of them people working independently to get that. So I had to be off Twitter. I had to put my Twitter on private for a bit. And then I went on Operation GCD, in which I gave an open and 9-minute monologue as to the situation with Tracy and how it affected me. But
here's what I think. Bringing it into kind of an interpersonal level. And Emily and I were kind of talking about this yesterday. It's like we have to have, in some ways, perspective around this thing with Tracy.
Yeah.
Right? Because you went through something where you actually were carrying a bit of a grudge with her. It feels like, right? And then what happens? There's no guarantee, and Tracy's gone, and you didn't have a chance to, make amends or make the bridge or say, hey, I was being a bit of a dick or whatever. And she didn't have a chance to say, I might have been a little bit short with you, right? And so this really, and this is the stuff, right, that we get into this research and we dig down and we're tearing things apart. And this is where my beef was with the whole Isaac Cappy thing. My beef for the Isaac Cappy thing was that he was not prepared. Even if he was a double agent, or he was not prepared to do what he did unless he was being chosen to do that. He was not prepared spiritually or psychologically to do that work. And so let's play it out. Let's say he did die. Well, that's the end result of somebody who got mixed up with a bunch of shit because they were chasing kind of an egoic kind of action, or who knows what the motivation was. Most people are not equipped to do the work. And we've got all these researchers, we've got all these tools, but what most people don't have is they don't have the heart and the soul and the individuation to get through this. To your point, this ain't no disco. It's not. It is not.
No rodeo. It ain't no rodeo, man.
No, it's no disco. Now, that said, we have got to be better pilots of our own ships. So in your case, it's like checking yourself, right? Is it really worth it for me to hold a minor grudge against Tracy? I go through shit like this too. And I have to go through it all the time in my head. Like, how am I treating this person? What do I want to get out of this? Where's my intention? I mean, we've got to be that razor sharp and clear. Because if we're not, then this other stuff comes in, it encroaches us, and it's almost a form of temporary possession. We're not in possession of ourselves, right?
Can I just, this is a very important point. This is my overall summary. Because of Alex Jones, he hit the gold at the end of the rainbow, in which he could have a multi-million-dollar lifestyle, and he has maybe $2 million in the bank, and he's secure and he's fine. This has now meant that others wish to maybe get where he's going. And the motivation of people in the alternative research community and the alternative or the conspiracy theory community, the alternative research community, whatever term you wish to use, a lot of these individuals, they actually really want that. And I believe we should not be part of using that as our ambition. We are truth seekers. We are here to speak truth to power. An example being Professor Griff of Public Enemy was severely poisoned with a unique poison that meant that he had to travel to London and have experts in herbs and alternative medicine look after him for over 3 months to cleanse his body of whoever poisoned him, because he was speaking truth to power. And Professor Griff lives a very ordinary life. Even his home was burned down. But this is the seriousness of it. Personally, I would not take it to that level. I have always said on numerous podcasts, speaking to Mark Devlin, speaking to yourself, speaking to Operation GCD and other podcasts that I've been on, the man doesn't have to threaten my life or my family's life or my friend's life. He doesn't have to sabotage me. All the man's got to do, if it's a group, if it's a governmental organisation, if it's a combination of an occultic ancient group, all they've got to do is, like the end of JFK, I sit on a bench, Donald Sutherland is sitting next to me, and he's telling me reality. And when I then hear what the reality is, and I look at it physically in the face as an individual, then that is the full stop to all my theorizing and my high-end speculation. And I have seen my rival. And then I can have that parlay, and I can go on watching my NFL, watching my Premier League, and I can live fine with that. Others might not be able to take the blue pill and go back into the matrix. But ultimately, if you go against this power system, as you rightly said, you need to put the armor on, both psychologically, spiritually, and physically even. And this puts people's lives at risk and loved ones at risk. And the alternative research community has to realise this is why we do what we do. We're not doing it for Patreon. We're not doing it for subscribers. We're doing it to change humanity for the better. And I want people like Catherine Austin Fitz, who goes on about her having this wonderful financial, economic brain. I want her to create a festival where people and minds can meet together in a professional setting, like Comic-Con in San Diego, on that type of level, where all the great minds can meet either once a year or once every 3 years, and people can iron out these beefs that they have with each other. They can sit down, they can have food, they can get to know each other's personality. Because if we do have hidden agents, and we do have people who are working with Machiavellian intent, or we have people who just want the money, who just want the Patreon money, who want to be another Jim Jones, by having this setting, when you have this face-to-face dialogue, then you can see who's real and who's a fraud. So what we have to do, we have to get people like Catherine Austin Fitz. We have to get people like dark journalists. We have to get people like Cliff High. We have to get all these people who are Greg of the Higher Side Chats. We've got to get all these people that are on this pinnacle, and we have to come together, because if we can have a Comic-Con over fictitious cartoon characters that people all over the world will fly into San Diego for, the amount of views that you get to collect, what Dark Journalist gets to collect.
I don't get very many views. You can't put me in that.
No, but you have a solid base.
I have a great group of people that get into whatever it is we talk about, right?
Isaac White's Illuminati eyes.
So Mark Passio tried this a few years ago. Mark Passio was doing something similar in Philadelphia.
Open your mind.
Yes.
Free your mind.
Free your mind. He had 2 years of that, and he doesn't do it anymore. And
because he's an ex-Satanist.
I understand it. That was a very interesting. That was a very interesting kind of experience for me, because I had 3 different people go to that conference, and none of them knew each other at the time, and they were all pitching Mark Passio and his people to get me to that conference. And I thought that was interesting, but that's another story altogether. I think to some extent that kind of meeting would be good. That kind of a summit would be really, really good. I think it would be good. I think it'd be healthy. And And I think that we need to change the game. And here's what we've been doing. We've been viewing these command control systems, right? The Babylonian mystery systems of enslavement, the military industrial complex, the Rothschild family, all these perpetrators of the lies of the Matrix. And we've been going at this like they're cancer and we're radiation, you know. And this is how we've been dealing with this. You know, we want to burn this thing out. We want to find out who the perps are, and we want to burn them out. And I think we need to change the game. And I think we have to go to a game where it's more about building the immunity and creating systems of empowerment or tools of empowerment so that we can at some point branch off and create our own system to do something that is not opposed in this dialectic or this duality that we're caught in. They're evil, we're good. And I think that while that can be true, I think it's also part of this trap that you've been talking about. And we got to do something asymmetric, and we got to change the game.
And then also what happens with people, we have like the famous song by Living Colour, Cult of Personality.
Love that song. Great band, by the way. Great band.
And what that song is about individuals that get power and then it gets to them. So what I just, I'm going to forward this to a number of people in the alternative or conspiracy theory research community, and I'd like your viewers to do it there. But ultimately, we do have a collective of people that get millions of views. An example being was Bob Lazar. Whatever you think of Bob Lazar, whatever you think of Joe Rogan, Bob Lazar was on Joe Rogan, and the figures for that within 24 hours were just like over 1 million. Right. So what it is that there is something in the air, there is something in the vibe. We do have Machiavellian players that are trying to take people, distract people, encourage people to obsess on things. And one of the things I always say in terms of what researchers should do is, that was the BBC, by the way, telling me another news flash, is that we have to enjoy a dirty joke. I always say that. We can't be that serious that we can't enjoy a good burger or a good vegan burger or a dirty joke and a beer or a nice fruit juice with our friends, and we can watch some sports and we can just listen to some nice music or do some cooking. And what we have to do is we have to use that as a time where we attach and then we attach in, because if we don't, that will then play us. So then that will permanently attach us. And then we will then, the ones who talk about reality and the ones who talk about the notion of what real and what isn't, we will be that hardwired to our beliefs and to our fears that we won't know what we are anymore. So we can't do the work, we can't do the service. So we have to know, and that is something to what Greg said about his friend. He advised Tracy and his friend, detach yourself from this. I told Tracy, I can't go to MI5 because the MI5 is the villains. So how can I go to Satan to try to stop Satan being Satan? But because Tracy was so, like, as a young mother, wanted to end this, you know, she went to the FBI, and in her own words, the FBI basically walked her out the building. And it was amazing that if you've got a woman who is a researcher, then the woman, you should at least bring the woman into the building because she's got a documents of evidence. Now, for other people to know the other side of this is from Steve Outram. The article that he wrote on his blog, Burners.me, is called Another Pedogate Researcher Suddenly Dies, R.I.P. Tracy Twyman. And if you want to get excellent information. And again, you want his side of this because he was in deeper conversations with Tracy than me. His Twitter is Steve, Steve, Outrim, OUTTRIM. So that again is STEVEOUTTRIM. That's him on Twitter. And he was the one that released the Dead Man Switch from Tracy. So ultimately, what I want from this conversation, I want people in the alternative research community to stop thinking about the Patreon, stop thinking about this building empires, and I want collaboration. I would love Greg to have a conversation with Steve around this whole issue. It might be a bit raw now, but I would like it in 6 months to a year time, where they can talk like how you talked about my behaviour towards people and giving instruction and advice, but then how they might view that. Hopefully that same type of insight can be given. But I want this to be the start of where people create friendships, big each other up. So I want Robert Phoenix on tinfoil hat with Sam Tripoli. I want Operation GCD to be on the higher side chats and vice versa. I want you to talk to JJ on Operation GCD and vice versa. Now, it's up to individuals if they want to make that happen, but ultimately, I hope if the system sees we're together and the system sees that we have some unity, then issues of where people are psychologically fragile will be less, because people can do what we're doing via the amazing notion of technology. Like, I was born in the late 70s. I remember watching a show called Buck Rogers. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that blew my mind. And
Gil Gerard as Buck Rogers.
Yeah, and then he had this little metal man.
Oh, yeah, metal guy. Yeah.
And, you know, and that blew my mind as a child. But some of the technology we're dealing with now is like little aspects of that were in Buck Rogers. And I think because you're older than me, I think you must probably have more of those profound moments than me.
Every day. Have them every day, Darren.
And that's it. So if people want to contact me and do you want to criticize me, do you want to talk more about it, I've divulged everything I know. I weren't given no hidden information from Tracy, because maybe Tracy knew what type of character I was. And because obviously I went through a bit in 2018 about this, maybe she realised that she didn't want to. I've said everything that I need to say. But if you want to have a right to reply, my Twitter is Daz Alt Fairy. That is DAZALT. And that is fairy as in science, not Tinkerbell. So I look forward to this. Please forward this. I will be forwarding this to Greg. I will be forwarding this to Steve Outrim. My thoughts are with Tracy. More importantly, a 6-year-old son. It's going to be really hard for him as a young man to come into this information. And he's got to make a decision if he's going to leave this, or is he going to, like, in terms of honour, take the mantle of his mother. So there's all things like that that could rise in 20 years' time. And then obviously to my friends from the RX Only Picture Show, SB and Jem, because they knew Tracy face to face, and they had that contact. And it's one thing I will say, Robert, I'm going to make it my ambition next year to come out and see you, so we can actually have time together away from this Skype and this video conferencing platform, but to come out to meet you and we can spend time together in memories. Because whilst this is good, it can't replace the real thing. And that's what Tracy's sad death has made me realise.
There's something in it for everybody. And that's what death does. It reveals mysteries about who we are at times and who they are, even though in Tracy's case, perhaps a deeper mystery is yet to be revealed. Darren, thank you for being a part of today's show. I really appreciate it. You take good care of yourself. I know it's probably brought up a lot for you here, but you take.
Well, I feel like I'm in an echo chamber because I'm glad you give me this opportunity, as I can't really tell my parents about this because they'll think I'm wacko. Some of my friends, it would be too much information to tell to too much of my friends. So
Yeah.
Because only one friend I've told about this who was slightly aware of Tracy, but it's been cathartic, it's been good. To get this out, to speak to somebody that knew it in some way and knew her research and knows alternative research community. So I hope I've made people think, and I look forward to views and opinions based on it, be they good, be they bad.
Okay, well, hang in there, man. And thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me. Thank you for having me.
Okay, bye for now, Darren.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was Darren Williams, all the way from Liverpool. And I got kind of emotional there at the end, didn't it? And, you know, so I go back and forth between the show and reading the comments. And some of the comments are very interesting. And today's show, in a lot of ways, was kind of this interesting collision of something that was topical, i.e. the passing of Tracy, something that was in some ways kind of ideological and not always connecting at certain points. But I think at the end, what you saw with Darren was Darren getting to an actual emotion. Like he was on the verge of tears. And, you know, we deal with the simulacra all the time. All the time. You know, when I come on here, it's part of a simulacra in some ways. Like I'm giving you sort of my persona, my version of reality. Sometimes it's spiffed up and cleaned up, and sometimes it's not. And, you know, and I try to do the best I can so that there is as very little veneer here as possible. But it's still a part of this kind of simulacra of experience. And what takes us out of the simulacra is emotion, real emotion, when we feel something. Like yesterday, I was on Facebook and Maury made a comment, and he passed on yesterday's show to, I think, Danny Arnold McKinney's group. And he doesn't do that often. And the reason he did it was because yesterday when I found out about Tracy, it really whacked me out. You know, it really whacked me out on a lot of levels because I have a kid, number one. Number two, I knew her, right? Number three, she's kind of in the same world that we all sort of share an orbit in. And so I was sorting stuff out yesterday, but it hit me. But what Maury did is he forwarded that show. And he said Robert was very pensive. And even yesterday when I was with Emily, which I haven't put the show up yet, Emily was really emotional. And I was still emotional as well coming off yesterday's show. Emily was really emotional. And then what did Randy do? Randy posted the show on Facebook and he said, you should watch it, must watch. Well, what's the common denominator there? The common denominator is emotion and feeling. That's what it is. And this is what's happened, I think, to a large extent with this quest that we've been on to find the holy grail of truth, is that along the way, in order to get to this stuff, right, we have to strip ourselves of our feelings in some ways. Because if we have feelings, and these are very, very dark portals, if we go in there with our feelings, what happens? In many cases, we'll just be macerated. And so what we do is we detune that so we can go into these places. And then what happens is that over time, we lose touch with that. And there's almost kind of, excuse me, it's almost kind of an entrainment that takes place. so that all we are fixated on is the goal. Finding that goal, finding the skeleton key that's going to unlock this, so that more truth begins to pour out into our consciousness, so we can share it with people and feel like we've done a good job. Because there's a hook there for that. There's a total hook there. There's a synaptical neuropeptide hook for that. That's why people do a lot of what we're doing here. Right? It fulfills something. But what happens is we lose touch with our emotion because of that, because of the things that we have to do, the things that we have to cover, the places we have to go, the dark, seamy material where Tracy was going and uncovering, and this is what's up for us, we have to strip down. Because if we go into those places where our hearts are wide open, sometimes it's not the best place to be, or it's not the best position to take. But if we do it over and over and over again, what happens? We get programmed and we lose touch of our feelings. And so we go on full blast and we rant about this and we rant about that. And sometimes it's a good thing to do. What happens is we lose touch with the core, real core of maybe why we really theoretically should be doing this. And I really feel like when Joe Rogan and Alex Jones and all that stuff went on and what's going on YouTube and Twitter, and I would say to Emily, and I've said this before, that the truth movement is over. It is dead. It is dead. And Tracy could be symbolic of that. And I hate to say it, but we saw the metaphorical death of the Alex Jones show, the Alex Jones circus, and Joe Rogan being the one that's promoted. And by the way, Emily and I talked about this. We didn't talk about it yesterday. We talked about it offline. We talked about how Joe Rogan was in Alex Jones's world, and Joe Rogan made a business decision. And Joe Rogan's business decision was, I'm not going to go down the Alex Jones path. I'm going to start to denounce some of these things. I'll bring in the Graham Hancocks. I'll bring in the, whoever. And we'll talk about stuff, but I'm not going to put my life at risk. I'm not going to put my kids' life at risk. And that's what I'm going to do. And Joe Rogan made a business decision. It's exactly what he did. May not respect him for it, but that's what he did. Owen Benjamin made a business decision. He said, I'm getting out. I'm getting out. I'm getting out of Hollywood. I'm going to go up to Washington. I'm going to start a farm, and I'm going to rant. I'm going to talk about Jews, and fuck you and fuck everybody else. I get deplatformed, but it's a business decision. He made a business, and I respect him for that. Joe does what people do inside of a system. He does what people do inside of a system. They see what's happening, and they say, okay, I'll make a choice because I want my kids to grow up. I don't want to get letters. I don't want to get instant text, instant messages in the middle of the night showing me what my kid did, 7 hours or 8 hours earlier in the day. I don't, that stuff happens, by the way. I think the truth movement, and I'm not saying this in a way to make you feel deflated or demoralized, but I think it's dead. I think it's dead. Tracy's dead. She's symbolic of it. We got to do something new. We got to do something different. It's not that we can't infuse our activity with truth. Truth is going to be the thing that's going to carry us through this time. It would carry us through this time. But we got to do something different. We've got to have a different angle. We've got to have a different approach. And instead of taking like, radiation and trying to burn out the cancerous cell, I think it's time for us to build a better body, to build a better immune system. And this is where creativity comes into play. This is where we have to become more emotional in some ways, but emotional in the sense where it's going to serve us. I understand why people disconnect from their emotions while they do the work. I get it. Trust me, I get it. But at the end of the day, it almost becomes a process of lobotomization. And finally, at the end of what happened today with Darren, he got to his emotion. And there was a lot of heady talk going on. And I could see it in the chat room. And even internally, I was trying to connect with Darren at a certain level. And then he wanted to take the conversation to a place where he was comfortable. Up here, right? Up here. Finally, at the end, he got out of here and got into here. And if there's anything you want to watch about today's show, it's probably the last 5 minutes. Although there are moments in here where he became very naked about how he was not resolved. He was not resolved with Tracy. And he's got to live with that, right? He was coming from a place of his ego, which is like, screw her, just another, drama-driven, high-powered female who's not going to respect me and listen to me. Okay, and I don't mind saying this, but that was his takeaway. And then he found out she died. And then he's got to deal with that. That's a lesson. That is a lesson. And this is what Emily was getting to yesterday during our show. She was being very heartfelt. She's being very heartfelt. People have internet beefs, all kinds of shit, right? We don't always agree. This could be the greatest gift that Tracy gives us in some ways, right? The greatest gift. Get off Beef Mountain. We don't always have to agree. I have very strong ideas about certain things. Not everybody agrees with me. It's okay. It's really okay. Yesterday, Three Divines Michael was on my case because I was saying America was a great country. And he came after me in chat. I thought about it. Well, how am I going to respond to this guy? Well, I don't want to alienate him because actually he shows up every day. He's extreme. I get it. I understand why he's pissed off and angry. He's got a point of view. I'm not going to go into that chat room and hit him with a neutron bomb. I can't do that. Maybe Robert circa 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015, maybe that's what I do or what I would have done. But I'm not going to do that now, and it's a test. It's a test. Now, I believe, based on what I shared, and I had to get there through 58 years of living my life and years of disaffection and years of being an outsider, right? And I had to look at this country, and I know full well what's gone on a lot of levels. Do I know everything? No, I don't. But I also know what goes on in other places, and believe me, it could be a hell of a lot worse. A hell of a lot worse. So when I say it's the best country in the world, it allows me to do this and to talk in a way that I do. I couldn't do this in China. I couldn't do this in Russia. Couldn't even do it in France. That's where I was born. I couldn't do it in France. If I were to get into Zionism and neocons and the Chabad cult, I'd be in fucking jail in France or in Germany, okay? So let's be clear about that. Will YouTube kick my video out? Sure, maybe. But I can still do it from my website. We have freedom of speech until we don't. Now we're on the cusp of where those things are threatened, and that's a really, really important point of conversation to have. And we're dealing with it right now. So at the end of the day, maybe Tracy's greatest gift to us will be the fact that we understand that life is short, it's fragile, it's vulnerable, and when we get into these areas, maybe not to lose touch with our humanity. And I think maybe that's the most important thing she'll share with us. Let me see what you guys have to say in the chat room. Robert held space under significant pressure, blah, blah, blah. I was grinding my teeth. We're not perfect, but everyone wants to come here. They want to come and then complain. Yep. Yes, Robert, we need to hold on to vulnerability. He has to let that go or kill him. What else do we have? We have to be in control of our emotions. That's what I'm learning as a Cancer. It's very hard. It's a serial he faces truths and finds some peace and moves forward with more wisdom. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Blade. Thanks again. Sticky. They were at risk anyhow. Obviously, just thought he beat it real good. What else we have? People are willing to keep this movement going. This is a hard road to travel. Encourage you the Bible. Keep your heart, mind, soul healthy. Absolutely. You had 2 opportunities to address Robert's question. You evaded answering, and let's decide. Board salad. Okay. Yeah, look, we're all in a certain place, okay? We're all in a certain place. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, Darren, were much more personal things, to be honest with you. Darren has a lot of challenges. He's dyslexic. you know, and he's mixed race, and I think sometimes he gets caught between worlds. And I wanted to talk about personal things with Darren, and we talked about Tracy, we talked about high-level stuff, and that's fine. That's fine. But by the end of the show, things got distilled, and we got something out of it. We got something out of it, I think. And I hope you did too. I had some funny stuff I was going to talk about today. Maybe I should save that to Monday. Maybe I'll save it to Monday. You guys want to hear funny stuff? You want to hear funny stuff? Or should we leave on a kind of a somber, sort of somewhat profound note? Maybe we'll leave it somewhat somber and profound. Perhaps. It's about hurricane names. I had a whole bit worked out in hurricane names. Let me check in with you guys one more time. Sure, yes. Yes, up the vibe. Okay. Please leave it where it is. Krista says, please leave it. You know what? I'm just going to leave with Krista. I'm going with Krista, okay? Krista says, please leave it where it is. Funny stuff. Let's laugh. Okay. All right. So look, I'm gonna give you something slightly funny and profound. All right. I'm gonna give you something slightly funny and profound. But then we'll leave it, and then I'll try to wrap it up there. I won't go into super funny. I'll try to keep it in the same space. So let me do this. I'm going to share something with you. We're about to get another big hurricane here. It's coming, right? And it's supposed to hit sometime this weekend. So first of all, I want to get out in front of this hurricane. It's called Barry, Hurricane Barry. I wanted to talk with, and Darren and I were theoretically we were going to talk about this. Let me find Hurricane Barry. You got to see this thing. You got to see how it's shaping up. It's looking like another massive hurricane that they're cooking. Big storm. Right? There it is. There's Hurricane Barry right there. So I actually wanted to talk about this today because it's supposed to hit maybe on Saturday, Sunday. And this looks like another cooker. And it is the season, but we also know that they have the technology to really turn these things into something much bigger, more wild at times than they might naturally or normally be. So this is Barry, and let me show you guys where the map is, where this thing might actually hit. Right here. I'll show you the map. So this is where it's supposed to come in, right? Right here, Gulf Coast. Gulf Coast. And right here is where it's at now, right? This is the stage that it's at now. And it looks like it's going to come right up through the Gulf Alley. Because right now, it's kind of hanging out off the coast of Mississippi. So by Saturday, Sunday, it looks like Texas is going to be hit by Barry. So all you people down in Houston, you may want to take notice. You may want to just pay a little attention here and get to some high ground. I'm not saying this is going to happen the way that it happened before, but it looks like we're staring down another big storm coming into this area. And the weather here over the last few weeks has been nothing short of schizophrenic. And perhaps this is another metaphor for what we're going through. You know, the storm of Jeffrey Epstein, the earthquake and the storm, the disruption, Uranus and Taurus with Jeffrey Epstein, Uranus and Taurus, a disruption with what happened in the China Lake Naval Facility, disruption. Tracy Twyman, the storm, disruption. You know, it seems to be a part and a theme of our time. Chaos being upon us, right? Sometimes chaos is creative. And sometimes chaos can be channeled, marketed, even advertised. And when that is connected to a business, and a business that's involved in the business of security and ensuring one's life and one's goods against the threat of chaos, well, could that potentially fall into a pattern of programming and mind control? And the answer is yes. And I've been thinking about this for a while now. Allstate has an advertising campaign that is twofold. Okay, twofold. It's about chaos and order. And it employs dualistic principles. I've been wanting to share this for a while. And this hurricane and this storm that's coming in sort of got the wheels turning in my life. So let me show you what Allstate uses in order to portray chaos, okay? This is chaos, or mayhem, which is a cousin of chaos. Mayhem is employed by Allstate. Mayhem, as portrayed by the actor Leo Burnett, shows up in situations where things become chaotic and mayhem ensues. Look at this guy. He's soul scalped. He is freaking soul scalped. This is Allstate. This is his picture from Allstate. And he shows up and he performs chaos. He's been doing this now for years. Years. He always plays a sociopath, by the way. He was in the HBO series Oz, and he was a classic prison sociopath. And you know, State Farm says, let's piggyback on him. His name is Leo Burnett. He's an actor. He's mayhem. He's chaos. Oh, he happens to be white. Okay. Allstate has another actor that they employ, and he's the antidote to chaos. And the actor's name is Dennis Haysbert. And Dennis Haysbert represents the guy who is the calm in the proverbial storm. He's sitting in a chair. It looks like an intersection in Manhattan. And Dennis Haysbert doesn't have a care in the world. He represents order. He represents the ability to tame chaos. Leo Burnett, on the other hand, is chaos, and he's mayhem, and they work for the same company. They work for Allstate, and Allstate has been doing this now, this advertising campaign, for close to a decade. And it's more than just an advertising campaign. This is mind control. This is absolute and utter mind control. And what they're saying here, or what they're doing, is they're playing with dualistic magic. This is Enochian magic, black versus white, right? This is the Gemini code right here, order and chaos, good guy, bad guy. And we're seeing this over and over and over and over again. And when I finally put these two things together, I thought to myself, this is malevolent genius at its finest. Because when you get into the psychology of insurance, you're dealing with people's insecurity. You're dealing with fear. And so Dennis Haysbert creates the illusion of order. In the center of the chaos, with traffic all around him, he's got his legs crossed. He's cool. He's cool as the late spring breeze blowing through the canyons of Manhattan. Meanwhile, on the other side, there's Leo Burnett, willing to inflict damage at every possible turn. Now I ask you, do you think this is random? It's not random at all. And it's part of an ongoing platform of programming. People are being played. But they're not in the same commercial. They're working for the same company. And they're working at polar opposite ends. There's a message in there, and you guys can figure out the message. It's not funny, it's not humorous, but it's a cross between ending the show with something humorous and staying in kind of a somber tone. And I wanted to share it, something I've been thinking about. I also wanted to talk about the hurricane, get out in front of it. And then we'll check in on Sunday night when I do the live stream. We'll see what's happening. But I do have some funny hurricane stuff I put away. Just not appropriate for now. Okay. Let me get on out of here. I want to thank everybody for being a part of today's show. And whether it's order or chaos in your life, may you deal with both with a great amount of respect and creativity and refined intention. And I want to thank Darren for coming on. I mean, kind of being a part of something, you know, real, slightly honest, and getting to an emotional place. And Darren, I know probably wasn't easy. You may go back and watch this video, and you may cringe, or you may find it was worthwhile. I don't know what your experience is going to be, but I hope it's a good one, positive one. I love you. You're welcome back here anytime. And again, heartfelt condolences to Tracy Twyman's family. You know, it's a heavy trip. It's a heavy trip, and it's going to stay with us for a while. And it probably should stay with us for a while. And we should learn from it on as many levels as we possibly can. So with that, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to accept what's possible. Thanks for being a part of today's show. You're listening to me, Robert Phoenix. I'll be back on Sunday nights with the Sunday night Astro live stream. And maybe people have been asking me to look at Tracy's chart and stuff, and I'm just a little hesitant right now. You know, I want the dust to settle, and I don't even know when Tracy was born. I'm sure I could figure that out if I needed to, but I don't really want to open up the hood on that yet, you know, because that's all up here for, you know, to some degree. So let's let that chill out for a little bit and settle. But I will be on the show. We'll be looking at charts. We'll be getting into stuff. And until then, come find me at robertphoenix.com. I'm reworking. I'm working on the site. So you can come over there, you can book a reading with me. Good with that. Again, use your head to discern what's real, your heart to accept what's possible. Stay real, stay in touch with your emotions. You know, try not to sweat the small stuff. And don't let grudges fester. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Have a great day. I'll be back on Sunday night.